John Donnelly, thank you. The latest now in a story that's prompted a lot of discussion about workplace behavior. Christine Galvan is live with new developments in the Miami Dolphins saga everyone seems to be talking about. Christine.
Melinda, according to an ESPN report, the NFL confirms offensive lineman Jonathan Martin checked himself into a hospital for emotional distress last week, even met with Miami's head coach there. And apparently the check-in was related to his professional relationship with a teammate that has now been suspended.
There are a lot of people talking about the situation in Miami.
The story seems to be everywhere.
You know, what's going on in Miami, you know, it goes on in every locker room.
From NFL news conferences to social media sites.
What should Jonathan Martin have done?
Webcasts, sports.
Richie Incognito had little to say about.
And cable news networks.
I'm just trying to weather the storm right now.
There doesn't seem to be a shortage of opinions on the obviously strained professional relationship between two football players for the Miami Dolphins.
It's time for us to, you know, start talking.
In case you hadn't heard, Jonathan Martin left the Dolphins last week and is undergoing counseling for emotional issues.
Late developments and details this afternoon now about the circumstances of Martin's departure from
an ESPN report that Martin checked into a hospital for treatment before leaving Florida hit Twitter as breaking news Wednesday. Martin's teammate Richie Incognito is accused of leaving racist and threatening text messages for Martin. He is currently on indefinite suspension, and athletes around the NFL and other professional leagues are watching to see what the NFL investigation will turn up.
Obviously, I don't know exactly what the situation is or was.
It's very strange. It's very crazy situation going on. I hope they can find a way to resolve it, but it's unprecedented. You know, I've never heard anything like this before. You know, so we'll see what happens.
To get you up to date, the NFL investigation will determine if Miami's coaches are to blame for the situation and whether teammates should have stepped in and stopped it.
The case involving Richie Incognito has been referred to a lot as bullying.
But what happens when it's on the job? Is it really bullying or is it something more serious? Joining us tonight are attorney Rick DeToto, Robert Andrews with the Institute of Sports Psychology, and corporate bullying consultant Craig Clayton. Thank you for joining us tonight, gentlemen. A very hot topic. A lot of folks are talking about it. So that term bullying, we hear it so much now. Do you think it's being used too loosely in this case? I'll start with you.
In the instance that you're talking about, sports-specific, absolutely it could cross the line from bullying to harassment, but I would defer to the legal experts for that.
Okay.
In the workplace, what he's talking about having encountered is what people are encountering every single day, and most of it is from manager to subordinate in the workplace, and it clearly crosses the line in the same manner.
And Rick DeToto, you say the NFL, that's not your typical workplace.
Well, you have to separate the corporate locker room, the room at Fox 26 compared to the Dolphins Corporation and what goes on in their locker room. From a legal perspective, we're going to look at what the culture is in that locker room. Obviously, in Fox 26, if you're not getting along with your boss, you can't go in his office and knock him out. I'm not saying he could do that with the Dolphins either, but it's a separate culture. There's different rules and norms, and I think courts and lawyers will look at that to determine what's appropriate and what's not.
Robert Andrews, you're a sports psychology consultant, so you're aware of this kind of culture of an NFL locker room. How should this have been handled? By the person being harassed, bullied, whatever you want to call it.
Well, ideally, but culture varies from NFL team to NFL team. And so if he was to start speaking up in one culture, he might get results. In this culture, I would be willing to bet he spoke up somewhere, but this specific culture evidently tolerates that. So he didn't have any assistance or no allies, nobody got his back.
Okay, so Jonathan Martin, he says he felt intimidated, but a lot of people in their jobs every day who don't play in NFL say, hey, that's nothing compared to what I'm dealing with my boss. So Craig, what should they do to address that?
In most cases, it's different completely from what's happening in corporate versus in that testosterone-filled environment of the NFL.
So in your everyday workplace, what do you do?
In the everyday workplace, it's normally directed at people because that person, normally the boss, feels threatened by that individual. They're normally a very good producer and performer. They're not the typical weakling in the schoolyard, if you would. But the steps that they're normally encouraged to take are utilizing HR and those appropriate resources, but they don't always work. Because just as in the NFL instance, if it's a culture of success at all costs, give me the numbers. I've known of individuals who have said this person's untouchable because of the results they deliver. Nobody's going to do anything about it.
But Rick, legally, does the law carve out exceptions for, oh, this is an NFL team, they have a different culture? It's still a workplace in the U.S., right?
And that makes sense, but the law's not handled in a vacuum, and they're going to look at all the circumstances surrounding what happened. If I was representing this person, I would immediately file a lawsuit. I would start deposing the head coach, the assistant coaches, and all those players to find out exactly what happened, to determine what the culture in that locker room, what the culture with the coaches were, what their policies were there any written policies, was this a code red, and that's what the court's going to look at.
I got to ask you, for the average person watching tonight in their workplace, Rick, a lot of people say, I'm going to sue. I think I have a case. I feel like they're bullying me. What's the difference? When does it cross that line to where they could call you and you say, okay, I think we've got something here?
Well, the civil lawsuit would be intentional infliction of emotional distress or some type of harassment. So it would have to be extreme, and you'd have to be able to prove it. Ways you prove it is by emails, obviously, text, voicemails, witnesses, or something else you can do is every time it happens, write it down. But if there's none of that stuff, it's extremely hard to prove based on witnesses. You're going to have the whole corporation going against you and all the lawyers, so it can be tough to prove that.
Robert, I saw you start nodding when we started talking about lawsuits and how to handle this.
Well, I was nodding about specific data because I work with bullied athletes all the time, and that's what I tell them: document, document, document. It's your leverage.
Good advice.
And the reality is, in the U.S., there is no state that has a law against bullying specifically. It's called HWBs, or Healthy Workplace Bills. They've been proposed in 26 states, including Texas. They've been defeated every time. The only place that has an existing law against it is the city of San Francisco, and it's called anti-mobbing, because that's the term in Europe, and every country in Europe has laws against bullying in the workplace.
Interesting. All right, well, thank you very much. You guys have given us a lot of information that we really didn't know about this topic, so thank you.
Dr. Jim, we'll send it over to you.